All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, I am going to talk about Jermell Charlo, Errol Spence Jr., and the reported fact that Jermell Charlo refuses to fight Errol Spence Jr. or Errol refuses to fight him, even if it's for Undisputed at 154, and therefore Errol Spence Jr. is a protected fighter by the PBC. Let's talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Thank you so much for coming to the video. Before I get into the meat of the video though, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed, hit the bell icon so you can be notified if we release more videos and all that good stuff. But let's get into this. This video here, I'm gonna try not to be agitated. However, this is in response to some reports that were sent to me that said that Jermell Charlo, who is the 154-pound champion, has said that he would never fight Errol Spence Jr. if Errol Spence Jr. comes up to 154 pounds, and that Errol Spence Jr. is being protected by Al Heyman and the PBC. Okay, so that is what I was told. I get a lot of messages. I actually went out and tried to find the videotape where Jermell Charlo had said that. I had heard that that was the stance before, but I had never actually heard Jermell Charlo say that. I have not actually heard Errol Spence Jr. say that. But for the sake of the video, and because of the tone that people are taking regarding that, I'll just assume that that is actually true. Now, if this is the case that Jermell Charlo says that he refuses to fight Errol Spence Jr., this is what I would say. That is wrong. And honestly, I have a bit of a hard time believing that that is actually the case from Jermell Charlo. Again, I've not heard him say that. I have not personally heard Errol Spence Jr. say that he wouldn't fight him. The only thing that I know is that there is difficulties around the fight because Derek James is the trainer of Jermell Charlo, and Errol Spence Jr. is trained by Derek James as well. And they both spar each other. They've worked out with each other for years. And there's an obvious friendship between the two of them. But that does not mean, I have never actually heard these guys say that they would not be willing to fight. So to use that as an argument to say that Errol Spence Jr. is protected from Jermell Charlo or vice versa seems a little bit funny to me. But just for the sake of it, because like I said, I have not heard that, but it does not mean that that is not their stance. That is a stance that I expect to be the case because of the relationships between the two parties. However, if that is the case, what I would say, I would treat it exactly like the situation with Terrence Crawford and Shawn Porter. If Terrence Crawford and Shawn Porter are friends with one another, associates with one another, and they do not feel like fighting, and they are in two different weight classes, that is no problem with that whatsoever. And when Terrence Crawford was at 140 pounds and he didn't fight, and Shawn Porter was at 147 pounds and the two didn't fight, there was no issue whatsoever. However, if once Terrence Crawford moved up to 147 pounds, I would say that that completely goes out the window. If they're in the situation to fight each other, then they should fight each other like they were when one was mandated to fight the other. Shawn Porter fought Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford won the fight, and there you have it. At the end of 2022, if Jermell Charlo gets his way and Errol Spence Jr. gets his way, Errol Spence Jr. will be an undisputed champion at 147 pounds, and Jermell Charlo will be an undisputed champion at 154 pounds. If Errol Spence Jr. moves up from 147 to 154 pounds, I find it very hard, and he actually fights at 154 pounds. I have a very hard time believing that those two guys, we'll put it this way, if he was in that weight class and Jermell Charlo refused to fight him, I would say that was Jermell Charlo ducking Errol Spence Jr. And I wouldn't say that means that Errol Spence Jr. is protected by the PBC. It absolutely amazes me how many ways people can find to try to tear at the PBC, try to tear at Errol Spence Jr., Jermell Charlo to a lesser extent, right? Because his name isn't out there as much. But if those two guys were fighting in the same division, I would say those guys should fight. There's nothing preventing them from fighting. And I have a suspicion that more than likely they would fight. Errol Spence Jr. doesn't seem like the type of guy that if he's not able to get, a Canelo Alvarez fight, he's not going to jump over Jermell Charlo to go to a 160 pounds and not try to fight for any belts at 154. If Jermell Charlo's at 154 pounds, Jermell Charlo is not going to duck a fight from Errol Spence Jr. If nothing else, because the fact that he would make more money fighting Errol Spence Jr. than he would ever make in his career fighting anybody else, anybody that would be at 160 pounds or anybody that he would have a reasonable chance of getting a fight at. So I find it very hard to believe that he would actually not take that fight and skip out on that fight just because he likes Errol Spence. There was I believe it was Mike McCallum, Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum, that said something to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He said it to somebody who was fighting him around who was in the same weight class as him. And if I'm mixing up the names for the guys in the story, please forgive me. Some of the more old school boxing fans will have the story right down. He said, "Hey man, I like you a lot. I'm a big fan of your, hey man, how you doing?" All that, acting like they were friends. And he's like, "Hey man, if we were friends, why didn't you fight me? I need a payday just like you need a payday." That's what friends would do if they're fighters in the same weight class and one guy can get another guy a lot of money. Another story related to that in old school boxing is the story of Bob Foster, who was at 175 pounds, which was not in the early 1970s, and maybe it was the late 1980s. He was in 175 in the late 1960s and in the 1970s, but he got a fight with Joe. He moved up in weight to fight Joe Frazier, and he moved up also to heavyweight to fight Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali, specifically, was under no delusions what was going to happen, no illusions about what was going to happen in that fight. Muhammad Ali was way too big for him, way too strong, and was going to knock Bob Foster out. Even though if Bob Foster touched you, there's a chance that Bob Foster could get you out of there. But he fought him because that was his friend, and because he wanted to give him the opportunity to make a lot of money, fights that he would not be able to get at 100 and at 175 pounds at lightweight. That's what these guys would do when you're a prize fighter. And there is no brotherly relationship between Jermell Charlo and Errol Spence Jr. Now, as far as Jermell Charlo, if he was going to move up to 168 pounds, yeah, that's off limits. He should not be, and nor would he, fight his own brother for money in a boxing ring. Those guys are in the same family. Same thing is with Vladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko. They were heavyweight champions in the same weight class at the same time, and nobody expected those guys to fight each other. But I just find it really hard to believe that, number one, that Jermell would actually pass up that fight. I'm still looking for the report where it is said that he actually said he would not fight him. But if that's the case, I will say this: I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right for boxing fans. I don't think that's right for Jermell or Errol. Let the best man win, man. And if Errol winds up beating Jermell, cool. If Jermell winds up beating Errol, cool. And matter of fact, if it winds up being a close fight, shoot, build in a rematch clause to do it again. But that's not that. It's just something that I don't see. I don't see taking place. But for the people that were, that are messaging me and saying, yeah, that is, how foul that is. Look, you're not going to get an argument out of me if the case is that Jermell Charlo wouldn't fight Errol or Errol wouldn't fight Jermell if he got to that weight class. I just would say, let's wait and see. Now, I don't have a problem talking about it because honestly, man, 90% of boxing conversations are talking about fights that would be very difficult to make. This fight between Jermell Charlo and Errol Spence Jr. isn't really even that far-fetched. It's the biggest name at 154. at 147, who very well may be up at 154. He said he's not going to stay there forever. And talking about a fight with a guy at 150, the 147 guy moving up to fight the 154 pound guy. It's just the only question for me would be, is what would Derrick James do? Would Derrick James stay with Errol Spence, or would he go with Jermell Charlo and the fight be made so they both can make millions of dollars? That's what happened with Andre Rozier when he had Sergey Deverenchenko fighting against Danny Jacobs. You just got to pick what corner is going to happen, man. But, anyway, man, if it's true that that's what Jermell said, I would say that doesn't make much sense for Jermell's pocketbook, and it really doesn't make much sense for boxing. But if the two of them agreed not to fight each other, I just don't see how that could take place unless they organize for them all to move up weight classes at the same time, which is what I speculated would happen. But upon reflection, if I'm Jermell Charlo and I'm getting towards the end of my career and that's the biggest fight that I possibly have, and you have an undisputed champion moving up from 147 up to 154, and I'm an undisputed champion at 154, I say, hey, look, brother, man, let's make this fight. Right? If you win, cool. If I win, whatever. But we're going to make a bunch of money. It's probably the biggest fight either one of us can have. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.